Just to follow on from that, I really warmly want to welcome Lucia and her family here today. But I also think it's a tragedy that they have to be here this morning to listen to this all over again. And just to repeat, in 2018, this House passed a motion for a public inquiry into the events leading up to the death of Shane O'Farrell. In 2019, in February 2019, the Seanad passed a similar motion, and we don't have it. We do, however, have a scoping exercise, the result of which Judge Houghton himself admits in his report that there were concerns in the Department of Justice regarding suggested changes in the terms of reference, suggestions proposed by the family to the judge, who gave them guarantees that their terms of reference would be taken into account. But they've completely been amended out of the terms of reference. Now I want to know a couple of things here this morning, and like Deputy Carty, the key question that has to be answered is why this report and the Department of Justice are constantly dealing with the events on the night. And the first 7 paragraphs of that report are all about the condition of Shane's bicycle, whether there was reflectors on it or not, the speed at which he was cycling. There's less and less as you go through it about the actual killer, and the fact that he was before seven courts, on bail before 5 or 7 courts, and was told by the court in Monaghan, the judge said, if this man offends again, I want him back here to jail him. That never happened. What was going on with the Gardaí is the question here. Why was a killer who was out on bail allowed to kill, and why do we have a scoping exercise that offends the family and addresses more the condition of the victim than it does of the killer? This is a pure victim blaming exercise. It has to be dismissed and a public inquiry given to this House and to the Seanad.
Thank you, Laskin Corley, and thank you, Deputies, for raising this matter. I do want to start by acknowledging the family who are in the gallery and thank them for being here this morning, but to also acknowledge the huge hurt and loss that has been caused by Shane's death, and indeed those who loved him in the wider family and the wider community. As the Deputies are both aware, on the 3rd of July my department published this report, the report that was carried out by Judge Gerard Houghton, arising from the scoping exercise into the circumstances surrounding the tragic and indeed untimely death of Shane O'Farrell, as you've mentioned, in August of 2011. Judge Houghton was appointed by Minister Flanagan in 2019 to carry out this scoping exercise, and this is in light of a huge amount of controversy and hurt and upset surrounding the circumstances of Shane's tragic death. Specifically, the purpose of the exercise was to advise the Minister as to whether any further investigation or inquiry beyond those that had been carried out was necessary, and if so, to advise on the form of such investigation or inquiry or its terms of reference. And I just want to reassure you, there was no attempt to delay anything, there was no attempt to prevent any potential further inquiry. It was very much open to Judge Houghton to outline if a further inquiry was needed and what the scope and what the tenure of that would be. I do want to thank Judge Houghton, who conducted the scoping exercise, and indeed everyone, including the family, who cooperated with this process. His work has resulted in what I believe is a very thorough, a very comprehensive report. It's 416 pages long, and I think every effort was made to make sure that this was a fair and a true and a representation, I suppose, of the situation, the facts at hand, and whether or not more investigation was needed. He submitted his final report to me on the 1st of June 2022, so last year. In receipt of that, I then sought the advice of the Attorney-General in relation to the issue of publication. Following that, then myself and the then Taoiseach, now Taoiseach Micheál Martin, met with members of the O'Farrell family regarding the report in terms of both the content and indeed the publication. And then more recently, Minister Harris met with members of the family in April. In his report, Judge Houghton has concluded that there are not any circumstances surrounding the death of Mr Farrell which warrant further investigation or inquiry beyond those that have already been carried out. And he's very clear on that. Beyond those that have been carried out, there is no further warrant of investigation. He further concludes that no inquiry is necessary into the systems and the procedures for sharing of information between An Garda Síochána, between the court service and other relevant state bodies operating at the time of O'Farrell's death. What he has done is make a number of recommendations, and I think very important recommendations regarding bail, regarding suspended recommended sentences, legislation, amendments to the Road Traffic Act, and in relation to notices of appeal that are administered by the court service. And I can confirm, and I want to assure deputies, that many of these recommendations are being progressed, if not enacted at this stage, and as they are implemented, I have absolute confidence that they will strengthen our justice system. Above all, what we want to ensure is that nobody goes through what the family here have gone through, that nobody else finds themselves in this situation. Whatever changes need to be made are being made, but it is very clear in this report that it does not warrant a further inquiry, which at the end of that will not actually give us any different answers or leave us in a different position than we are now. I know this is extremely difficult in general, and I know in particular this is extremely difficult for the family, but I would urge deputies to read the report. I know you have, but those who haven't, to read the report, to go through all of the facts that have been outlined here. He's very clear that a further inquiry would not help. And the most important thing here is that people are, that we support and help the family, but a further inquiry, I believe, would not do that.
Yeah, I want to endorse everything Deputy Carty has said, but not to repeat it, but just to repeat something I did say earlier on. In his report, the judge says that the Department of Justice raised concerns regarding the suggested changes that the family wanted in the terms of reference, and the terms of reference were comprehensively amended by the Department of Justice. Explain that, please. What was going on that the Department of Justice felt necessary to invite the family to look at the terms of reference, to have an input into it, and then comprehensively change it according to the judge? And so what we have here is 7 paragraphs explaining why Shane was part of his own problem, because he didn't have reflectors, he didn't have jackets, he didn't have this, that and the other. What page in this report does it explain why a man with so many convictions was at bail and at liberty to kill? You name the page to us where that says, and please explain to us why the department comprehensively changed the terms of reference, and those are the words of Judge Houghton, not mine.
Thank you, deputies. I would suggest that we have taken action. The very fact that this report has taken significantly longer, I think, is not what anybody expected, but it is because Judge Houghton wanted to make sure that this was thorough, that every stone was unturned, that no stone was left unturned, that any information that could be important here, that is important, that could form the basis of a further inquiry, that anything that might necessarily need further inquiry, that every single stone, as I said, that it was not left unturned. That's why it's taken so long. The terms of reference were set out very clearly. There was very clearly engagement with the family, with many other people as well on this, to make sure that all of the facts were uncovered here. And I would again ask deputies to read the report, to read what's in the report, to take the time to consider the contents of the report. I have no problem sitting here and going through it with deputies in the House. I have no issue with that. There's no problem. I think anybody who's coming into the House, it gives them an opportunity to read it, to go through it in detail. But I'm very clear, the report itself states that there is no need for further inquiry here, and that is the basis of all the facts that we have in this. And I do accept the report. It has been published and government has accepted it as well.
Minister, can we have a debate in this House, because the House and the Shannon have been ignored?
Was Mr Grzuska Garden former Minister?
Really? Really?